Turn up your mind.
All right, welcome to the Randi Rhodes Show for a Wednesday. I'm Nicole Sandler of RadioOrNot.com, in for Randi today. And I want to start by saying, wow, there's so much to talk about today. There's so much going on in the news, from a massive train derailment in Virginia that just happened within the last hour. And I haven't seen much coverage of it. I haven't seen much about it except for a horrific photo with lots of black smoke that somebody posted on Instagram with the note attached to it. It says, "Wow, guys, the train derailed right outside my building. Pray that no one is hurt." I guess it's outside of Lynchburg. Our thoughts are with those people, and I hope all is okay there. Then to the south, where it's yet another day of tornadoes and flooding in Alabama and northern Florida, in Pensacola, flooding like they haven't seen in I don't know how long. Streets out, some deaths reported. I hate to say it. Those kinds of events are going to be happening more and more often, as climate change takes its toll on the planet. So that's something else we can talk about today. A couple of hours ago in the Senate, the Senate Republicans once again did it again. The Senate Republicans filibustered a minimum wage increase. Yeah, you've heard the push, and the need to increase the minimum wage is just is so strong. I mean, you know what's going on in this country today. We have not had a minimum wage increase in a few decades. People are hurting. Somebody working full time for minimum wage, which too many people are these days, cannot make ends meet. You cannot pay the bills on $7.35 an hour. I'd say you can't even pay the bills on $10.10 an hour, but at least it's a step in the right direction. But what happened today in the Senate? Well, unfortunately, because when the Democrats sort of fixed the filibuster rule, they only did it for cabinet level nominations and executive
judicial nominations,
judicial and cabinet level nominations, but not for legislation. So in order to even open debate on a bill to increase the minimum wage, they need 60 votes. And unfortunately, they don't have 60 Democrats in Congress. So the vote was 54 to 42, with 4 senators not voting, and it was straight down party lines, with one exception. I applaud Bob Corker of Tennessee, who voted yes. But other than that, Mark Pryor of Arkansas didn't vote, nor did Mark Pryor of Arkansas. John Boozman, also of Arkansas, didn't vote. Oh, I guess Arkansas, they're dealing with tornadoes, so maybe that's why neither one of them were present in the Senate today. Thad Cochran of Mississippi and Roger Wicker, also of Mississippi. Those are the 4 senators who didn't vote. And I'm wondering if they're back in their states where they're dealing with massive tragedy from the tornadoes that have been striking and all the storm damage. That's possible. In which case I wouldn't fault them for missing the vote. But 54 to 42. Of course, the 2 independents in the Senate, Angus King and Bernie Sanders, both voted with the Democrats. This is despicable. Truly despicable. At a time when really Americans are hurting, for the Senate to deny debate on raising the minimum wage. Isn't this what we put them there for? I get it if at the end of the day, if at the end of debate, that they have to vote the way they're going to vote. But to deny cloture to open debate, to talk about the need to raise the minimum wage, that's disgusting. And every single one of these Republicans who voted against opening debate, against talking about why we need or don't need to raise the minimum wage, this is what we put them there to do. And by them voting down a cloture motion to open debate, they're shirking their responsibilities. That's disgusting. And yet they speak out of both sides of their mouths. Today, Paul Ryan, I guess, was trying to do a bit of damage control. There it is. To do a bit of damage control from an interview that he gave last month. It was March 12th. Paul Ryan did an interview with Bill Bennett. And Bennett or Bennett? Bennett, right. Bennett. And it says Bennett here. That's why I asked. You know, you really hear what this guy thinks. You hear where he's coming from. What forms, I guess, his worldview and opinions on life, because he goes and he quotes none other than Charles Murray, an avowed racist. You know, he's in the Sterling Club for Men. We should start a new, a new organization. We can put Donald Trump in there. We can put Donald Sterling in there. You know, we could put a few Donalds in there. Anyway, so here's what Paul Ryan said last month that got him in a bit of hot water.
Okay. But, I mean, a boy has to see a man working, doesn't he?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And so that's this tailspin or spiral that we're looking at in our communities. You know, your buddy Charles Murray or Bob Putnam over at Harvard, those guys have written books on this, which is we have got this tailspin of culture in our inner cities in particular, of men not working and just generations of men not even thinking about working or learning the value and the culture of work. And so there's a real culture problem here that has to be dealt with. Everybody's got to get involved. So this is what we talk about when we talk about civil society. If you're driving from the suburb, you know, to the sports arena downtown by these blighted neighborhoods, you can't just say, I'm paying my taxes, government's going to fix that. You need to get involved. You need to get involved yourself, whether through a good mentor program or some religious charity, whatever it is, to make a difference. And that's how we help resuscitate our culture.
Really? Yeah. That's how we help resuscitate our culture. Did you hear the dog whistle in there? I know it's kind of high-pitched, right? But the blaming poverty on those lazy inner-city men. Yeah, you know, he can think that he's talking in code, and only those, you know, other disciples of Charles Murray and Donald Sterling, I guess, would understand. But we know full well what he was saying there. You know, he's saying, oh, those lazy blacks, you know, it's their culture. They just sit around. You know, Cliven Bundy, another member of the Sterling Club for Men, they sit around and they're lazy. And so today, finally, Paul Ryan actually spoke to the Congressional Black Caucus, and when they emerged, well, they were kind of okay, sort of.
What is good out of this is we need to talk about better ideas on getting at the root cause of poverty to try and break the cycle of poverty.
Yeah, to break the cycle of poverty. You know, it's the same Paul Ryan who said after, you know, as we're marking the 50th anniversary of the war on poverty, well, that didn't work. Well, that didn't work because Republicans then got voted into office and cut the funding that was allocated to fight poverty. So, you know, if you don't adequately fund something, it ain't going to work. Just look at No Child Left Behind. You can't pass legislation and pay lip service without paying the bills that go along with it. And so what Paul Ryan's doing in his own special way to try to fight poverty, hey, is is putting out a budget that cuts food stamps, that cuts assistance, that cuts the social safety net, that privatizes all benefits, that privatizes education, that makes it harder to survive in this world for people of limited means. You know, I went to see Bruce Springsteen last night, and wow, what an amazing show. And if you follow me on Twitter, at Nicole Sandler, I was live tweeting the show last night because it was just so awesome. And it reminded me of what I love about Springsteen. First of all, the arena was packed. It was the arena down here in Fort Lauderdale where the Panthers play. And here's a big, giant sports arena with, you could tell, the millions of dollars in corporate sponsorships all around the place. And the tickets weren't cheap, but I got to tell you, Springsteen has always made a point of keeping his ticket prices as low as he can. So even though the top ticket price was $140, a lot of that goes to the fees and the Ticketmaster and all that stuff. You look at some of the other big shows and they're double that. But that aside, the place was packed. A lot of middle-aged people like me having a great time. And there's Bruce Springsteen, who I think is now 62 years old, looking like he's 19, on stage and performing for the first time. And not only does he put on the most energetic, amazing rock and roll show, right? He went for 3 hours straight, 8:10 to about 11:13 nonstop. They never left the stage. They just kept going. And just when you thought the show was over, he'd strap on another guitar and launch into something else. But it was some of the songs that reminded me what it was that drew me to him all those years ago. When the first time I saw Springsteen was in 1978. And I think the fourth song he played last night, he launched into Badlands. And Badlands is so many of those, his early songs were about, the girl and the car and the, typical boy thing, but they all had this underlying theme about, the working guy. He did a song, he wrote a song, Factory, about his father who got up every morning, before the crack of dawn and went to work in a factory and what it was like. He's always been a champion of the working guy, of the union, a union mentality. I tweeted out, he did The River. Bruce Springsteen will do a 3-hour show and people show up with signs, for requests. And he goes out into the crowd and grabs signs and then goes through them and he'll hold one up to the band and they'll launch into a song. And he was playing some, really rare songs last night that I never in a million years thought I'd hear him do live. And so one of the songs he did was The River. And The River is it's a brilliant song. It's a story about a guy who, is 19 years old and he had these high hopes for a future and he got his girlfriend pregnant. And he said, the lyric goes, and I got Mary pregnant, and man, that was all she wrote. And for my 19th birthday, I got a union card and a wedding coat. And he would sing about the struggles of the common man, in Badlands. All I could think, and here's a song from the 70s. And I thought, how prophetic, because one of the lyrics that sticks out, poor man want to be rich, rich man want to be king, king ain't satisfied till he rules everything. Isn't that what we're living today? But again, the songs are about, the little guy overcoming adversity and breaking through. And that's the struggle we're in today. We are. I got to wonder why Chris Christie is such a huge fan of Springsteen's. You got to figure he's never listened to the lyrics. The show was great, and it reinvigorated me. And so, I got to thank a wonderful listener who actually sent me the ticket, because I'm in a boat right now where I couldn't justify the expense to go, right? And I look at how today's Republican Party is seemingly doing everything they can to keep the poor and have the rich man elevated to king and making sure the king rules everything. That's the oligarchy under which we are living today that we need to change. All right, so much to talk about today. The progressive movement lost a great hero. We'll get to that. We're going to talk the TPP. We're going to talk about voter ID and why that's a bad thing, because it's not voter ID that's a bad thing, but the way the Republicans are using the voter ID. All that and so much more. 866-87-RANDY is the number, 866-877-2634. Nicole Sandler for Randi Rhodes. We'll be right back.
Randi Rhodes. Radio, only smarter. This is the Randi Rhodes Show.
Hi, Phoenix. Call me right now at 866-87-RANDY, 866-877-2634. This is the Randi Rhodes Show on 1480 KPHX.
Either you're in favor of raising wages for hardworking Americans, or you're not. Either you want to grow the economy from the middle out and the bottom up so that prosperity is broad-based, or you think that top-down economics is the way to go. Republicans in Congress have found the time to vote more than 50 times to undermine or repeal the health care bill for millions of working families Earlier this month, they voted for a budget that would give the wealthiest Americans a massive tax cut while forcing deep cuts to investments that help middle-class families, but they won't raise wages for millions of working families? When 3/4 of Americans support it? It makes no sense.
Not only does it make no sense, it's really despicable. That was President Obama speaking just moments ago about the Republican filibuster of a cloture vote. So they wouldn't even open debate on the idea of raising the minimum wage. Welcome back to the Randi Rhodes Show. I'm Nicole Sandler. One more thing about Bruce Springsteen before I go to the phones at 866-87-RANDY, and that is, again, I first saw him in 1978, and literally I've seen Springsteen play dozens of times. And you could, because it's never the same show twice, just so you know. It's always different. And what he did last night is what he does at every stop. In every city, Bruce Springsteen brings a food bank to the show. He sets them up in tables around the arena. Last night here in Broward County, Florida, it was LifeNet for Families. LifeNetForFamilies.org is their website. They've been feeding people here in Broward County since 1985. I have their brochure. I will be giving them some donations. They accept everything from cash donations to in-kind donations. They help people. That's what Bruce Springsteen is about. Unlike these people, in Congress, it's just unconscionable what they do and how they talk out of both sides of their mouth. Paul Ryan lies through his teeth when he said, we want to help people out of poverty. And then he puts forth a budget that will do everything to keep people living in poverty and only enrich the rich even further. It's sickening. Joan in Forestville, California. Hey, you're on the Randi Rhodes Show with Nicole.
Hi there. I just wanted to say to you, I'm 67 years old, and I went through all the great 60s music and 70s music. And the first time I heard The River, I got chills.
Wasn't that that song? When he started playing it, and that was a request last night. Someone was holding up a sign that said The River, and he said, I want to play this for all the young, there's a lot of young people here, some of you who couldn't have been here for more than, our last couple of tours. And he said, I want you to hear this. And that was an interesting choice, I thought, because it's a story of unrealized dreams.
Yes, absolutely. And man, that was all she wrote.
Yeah.
And, every time I hear that song, it gives me chills.
Mm-hmm. I get chills just as you said that, yeah.
He's the most amazing artist, and I'm so glad that you got to hear him sing this song because I went to the River concert.
Me too. That was my first tour, my first Springsteen tour.
Hear it, but I know what it's like to hear that song in person, and it just pulls your heart out.
Yeah, and the fact that, he walks the walk. He puts, he's the real deal, and he cares about people. And
he stayed that way all this time.
Yeah.
He's still doing it.
Yeah, he's still doing it.
Yeah. And you're going to still be doing it, too, aren't you?
I am. Look, the Randi Show, unfortunately, is ending, and that tears my heart out as well. Yeah. But I'm going to keep going at radioornot.com. It's a free show. You can listen live, from 10 to noon Eastern, Monday through Thursday, or any time on the site via the podcast. It's always free. So thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And I agree, it's the most despicable thing on the planet when all these rich millionaire senators can't give poor people a raise to $10.10.
Right. Isn't that disgusting?
You can't hardly live on $20 an hour.
Right. No, you can't.
In California, things are high, but still,
It's unreal. It's like they're doing everything they can to keep the poor people poor and let those the king rule everything.
Slave wages going.
Yeah, you got it. Joan, thanks for the call. All right, more of your calls coming up in a conversation with John Nichols of The Nation. We lost a real progressive champion this week, and we want to tell you about Tim Carpenter. Nicole for Randi. We'll be right back.
Randi Rhodes.
Well, Randi will be back on Monday. She'll be here for another 2 weeks, and I'm sure those are going to be 2 weeks of amazing radio. I'm Nicole Sandler of radioornot.com. Always honored to be here filling in for Randi, but especially this week because, just knowing that the end of her show is coming is so bittersweet. You see, if you're listening to Randi's show, you are concerned about the ways of not only this country but the world. You're concerned about the direction this nation has taken. You pay attention to the news. You pay attention to politics, and I'm guessing that you're not real happy with the way with just the way things are going right now. I'm guessing you're probably a progressive, and I'm guessing that you know of, the few good progressive organizations that are out there, one of which is PDA, Progressive Democrats of America. Let me bring in John Nichols of The Nation to talk about a guy who was the epitome of a progressive activist who's been on the front lines fighting for you and me, fighting for us for so long. And unfortunately, he lost his fight with cancer on Monday. And I'll tell you, we lost a real hero, not only for the progressive movement, but for this country. John Nichols, thanks for joining me today on Randy's show.
It is great to be with you, Nicole, and what a nice setup for a conversation about Tim Carpenter.
I got to speak with Tim on the phone many times, living in Florida, obviously, and I've interviewed him a lot over the years. I had no idea he was sick, and I hadn't spoken to him lately, and now I really regret that because I should have had him on my show more often.
We all feel that way,
right?
Of course. But can I just tell you, you wouldn't have known he was sick last week.
Real. I know. I'm reading your piece that's up at The Nation about Tim Carpenter's politics of radical inclusion in the streets and in the polling booths. And you said you were on the phone with him, like hours before you learned that he died?
Yeah, absolutely. And he was calling not to talk about how he was sick and stuff like that. He would drop, literally, in the midst of a conversation, he'd say, "Oh, yeah, I got to take off now. I'm checking into hospice."
Oh, my God.
Oh, no, I'm not kidding. Or I'm just coming out of chemotherapy. But I have never in my life experienced somebody who was going through such a battle and yet absolutely continued organizing.
Right.
Absolutely continued the fight for economic and social justice, peace, and sustainability, the four kind of linchpins of what he and PDA were about. And I think the most important thing as we talk about Tim is not to look back too much, because he wouldn't let us do that, but to let people know what we've lost. Tim Carpenter came out of Orange County, California, and some of your older listeners will know that Orange County used to be the bastion of the John Birch Society.
Orange County is still pretty red. In fact, I lived for many years in Los Angeles, and we talk about going behind the orange curtain. Once you crossed over the county line, you were going behind the orange curtain. It's still pretty conservative, although not as bad as it used to be.
Well, that's how Tim referred to it, too, behind the orange curtain.
Yep.
But you can imagine, as like a 12, 13-year-old, he was out nailing up McGovern signs in Orange County.
Love it.
In 1972.
Wow.
And he's still as a teenager, a young teenager, like 16, 17, signed up with Tom Hayden when Tom Hayden ran an insurgent campaign for the Senate in the 70s. By the time Tim got to college, he was working with the Catholic worker movement, and he was sleeping on the streets of Santa Ana, California, not a big liberal town, with the homeless. So that when the police came to remove the homeless, there'd be an activist there who knew the law to push back. He then went into the anti-nuclear movement, and if you can imagine this, Nicole, here's this guy. He's such a brilliant organizer, such a talented political player, that he went from sleeping on the streets with the homeless to flying around the country with Jackson Browne and Bonnie Raitt and all of the rock stars who became key players in the anti-nuclear movement in the 80s.
Sure.
Then he translated that into being a key aide to the Reverend Jesse Jackson when Jackson ran for president. Then he helped to organize Jerry Brown's 1992 presidential campaign, in which he ended up addressing the Democratic National Convention of 1992, calling on delegates to hold true to their progressive principles. He then went on through the 90s, every anti-war, every economic justice struggle, became a key player in Dennis Kucinich's presidential campaign, actually deputy manager. And when the Kucinich campaign ended in 2004, Tim Carpenter had the, I think, genius to recognize that the Democratic Party was not making Iraq a big enough issue, that it wasn't focusing enough on what people really were angry about. So he pulled together Kucinich supporters, Howard Dean supporters, and other activists. They went across the river from Boston, or, up the road, really, and held a gathering where they decided that they would form a group that had as its purpose making sure that the Democratic Party never lost touch with its New Deal, progressive, idealistic, 60s civil rights, anti-war, 70s, social justice, 80s anti-nuclear, 90s, again, anti-war, I hate to say. But, bringing together and keeping those values alive. They chose as their slogan, healthcare, not warfare.
Right. I had a bumper sticker, one of those bumper stickers on my car for a long time.
And then they called themselves Progressive Democrats of America.
Yep.
They took off from there.
Yeah.
And I know people can get deeply discouraged about politics.
Yeah.
And they can see electoral politics as very corrupt and very disappointing. The interesting thing about Tim Carpenter is he lived in a little house in Florence, Massachusetts. He never made a lot of money. He was never, like the biggest star of politics.
Right.
But if there was one person in the Democratic Party who absolutely, consistently stood up for progressive values, it was Tim.
Yeah.
And as a result, people like John Conyers and Alan Grayson and Bernie Sanders and so many others, when you ask them about Tim Carpenter, their faces light up.
Yeah. Well, because he was the real deal. So John Nichols is with us from The Nation, obviously a friend and a colleague of Tim Carpenter's, because, fighting for the same, for progress, for progressive ideals. And you'll like this story. I was in D.C. Probably 3 years ago, and although, as I told you, I'd spoken with Tim on the phone many times, we hadn't met in person. And I walked into a room, he was setting up for a presentation he was doing, and I spotted him, and I had to go up to him and shake his hand and introduce myself. And he stopped what he was doing to talk to me, and we really had a great conversation. And I'm trying to remember exactly how it went, but it was around the time the Occupy movement was happening. And we were talking about it, and he's like, here's the thing. We need an inside-outside strategy. And I'll tell you, that's my big lesson from Tim Carpenter that I'll always remember. And he's so right. I appreciate so much what Occupy did, but where I think they were lacking was on the inside strategy. Because if you want to affect change, you got to do it from the inside. Yeah, you can push from the outside, but you got to work inside too. And that's why in the piece you have up at The Nation right now, it's linked in the homework section at randyrhodes.com. You talk about how Tim was a Democrat. He wasn't part of the Democratic Party structure, and much to the I guess disappointment of the Green Party people and others, he worked within the Democratic Party to affect change. You need the inside-outside strategy, and that is the lesson that I learned that I attribute directly to Tim Carpenter.
I think your point is very well taken, and although I don't make these choices always, I recognize, and I actually think Tim did too. There are some times when a Green candidate might be able to bust on through and make it. There were times when a socialist like Shama Sawant out in Seattle might bust on through and make it.
And Bernie Sanders, is a socialist.
Yeah, and an independent.
Yeah, right.
So Tim loved all that. Mm-hmm. There was nothing doctrinaire about it.
Right.
He worked across all kinds of lines, but his argument was, this is a very interesting one, it was very kind of a mission-driven, witness-driven kind of politics. As he said, the Democratic Party is one of the two major parties in America. Mm-hmm. It's the one that, by and large, not always, but by and large, a lot of progressive voters turn to, and that certainly a lot of the communities that most need a strong and viable government look to and vote with. And he said, there's got to be somebody in that party standing up for the grassroots, for the working class. And so I think that while he always was a Democrat, his line was, I'm never satisfied with the Democratic Party.
Right.
And so
you quote him as saying, I'm not satisfied with the party as it is. I want the party as it should be. Yeah. And that's what we need to do is push them. Look, some people will criticize me because I'm critical of the Democrats. But that's what we have to be. Because I can't imagine anyone satisfied with today's Democratic Party as they are.
Well, here's the interesting thing. This is because, Nicole, I listen to you and love the way that you bring an independent, progressive perspective to these discussions.
Thank you.
And you know what the thing is? Some people see that as being not loyal enough or not, kind of on the team enough. But here's the thing that Tim taught me. This thing I learned from watching Tim over the years. He would anticipate issues. And he would be out front at a time when frankly a lot of other Democrats didn't want to go near something. Holding George Bush and Dick Cheney to account for the lies and all the wrongdoing associated with the war in Iraq, really pushing for a genuine health care reform, not a compromise, but also things like marriage equality and a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United, big, bold proposals. When Tim Carpenter got on board with them, most other Democrats weren't quite willing to go there. But the reality is that as time moves forward, you realize, well, here was somebody who went out and kind of did the groundwork. They laid the outlines out so that as the party itself.
Okay, that's weird. That's the second time this week that our phones just in the middle, we're talking about something important, progressive politics, and our phones go haywire. Hi, NSA. I don't know what happened, but let me just, while Sean is redialing John Nichols, say we're talking with John Nichols of The Nation about Tim Carpenter, who lost his battle with cancer on Monday. And if you didn't know he was ill, I guess that's because Tim worked up until the last minute. John writes in this piece that he's got up at The Nation that he was on the phone with Tim just hours before he heard the news that he had passed. He says, Tim was on the phone with me running through the latest numbers from a national petition drive he and Progressive Democrats of America had organized to urge Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders to seek the presidency. That's what Tim Carpenter was doing hours before he died. Yeah, you know, and as a legacy, you know, you might want to check out Progressive Democrats of America, their website, pdamerica.org, and join, because there are chapters all over the country. Sorry, John, I don't know what happened there. I think someone's messing with us.
I heard a little flutter and then
yeah, second time this week.
What I was saying was simply that you know, sometimes there are people who are ahead of the curve who tell us where we're headed, and as Democrats in the U.S. Senate now prepare sometime this year, if what Senator Schumer is saying, to vote on amending the Constitution to get big money out of politics.
Yeah.
Well, 4 years ago, I could hardly find anybody on Capitol Hill talking about that. Very, very few members stepping up to talk about a constitutional amendment being the necessary response. 4 years ago, Tim Carpenter was out already petitioning on it.
Yeah. He was ahead of the curve. So, John Nichols, let me ask you this. Obviously, while we were getting you back on the line, I mentioned Progressive Democrats of America, pdamerica.org. There are chapters everywhere. There are a few other progressive groups. I think the Progressive Change Campaign Committee is a good one. Democracy for America is a good one. But the bottom line is people really need to step up and get involved, because the very future of this nation is on the line. In a quick soundbite, I guess, how do you see the progressive movement today? Where are we?
I think it's in a fantastic place,
yeah.
and it's never covered well by media.
No,
for maybe you. but here's the reality. I don't ever tell people what group to join or where to go. I agree with you. Get engaged.
Yep. What
you're going to find is when you engage, there are people across this country who are working on fundamental issues. And the interesting thing is, if I had told you 5 years ago that one of the central issues in America was going to be income inequality, and we're going to have mass movements to raise the pay of restaurant workers to $15 an hour, or at least $10 an hour. If I told you that, Nicole, you'd say, well, boy, you're an optimist.
Yeah, you're right. But here's the challenge ahead of us. Today, the Senate Republicans filibustered the cloture motion on the bill to raise the minimum wage. So we've got a big fight ahead of us. And I'll throw this out there. People want to get engaged. A good place to start and get involved is this summer, Netroots Nation is going to be in Detroit, because they like to take it to places where the money that the convention brings will do some good. You know, that's a good place to meet a lot of progressive activists and get involved. Just one more thing to throw out there, but getting involved is the key, and that's what Tim Carpenter will tell you too, right?
I think it absolutely is. And Nicole would also say, listen to progressive media, support progressive media, and understand that real things are happening across America all the time. There are real heroes out there doing the work, folks like Tim. And our job is to make sure that citizens know how they can tap into this fight. There's plenty of money coming down from on high. The only way we're going to fix this thing is if all of us start organizing at the grassroots. And Tim Carpenter, I'll tell you something, he used to show up in his beat-up car with his Bob Dylan cassette, stuck in the blaring out, and he'd always come with a dozen people. He'd pack them in because Tim Carpenter was the kind of activist you need. He didn't show up. He didn't show up just to sit and watch. He showed up to do something.
I hear you. John Nichols of The Nation, thank you. Thank you for this beautiful piece about Tim, and thank you for all you do. It's great talking to you. We'll do it again moving forward back at my place at radioornot.com.
I'd love it. I'd love it, Nicole.
I'll talk to you soon.
Strong.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye. All right, Nicole for Randy. We'll be right back with your calls next. All right, it is Nicole Sandler in for Randi Rhodes. Let's go right to the phones and talk to is Dan in Northern California, listening on iHeartRadio. Hey, Dan.
Hi. So I'm from the Dega Bay. You know where they film the birds?
Oh, yes. I love the birds. It's scary.
It's beautiful out here right now.
Oh, I'll bet.
Well, so, Nicole, I'm watching the Sunday shows, and I get so absolutely frustrated because I hear Laura Ingraham say, 2 million people are going to lose their jobs because of the Affordable Care Act. And they just kind of go, oh, okay. And
can we just say, let me just stop you, Laura Ingraham, who ABC News just decided to bring on as a paid contributor, really? Because they need another right-wing crazy voice?
Well, what kills me is that, she's talking about the CBO saying that 2.5 million people will leave employment because they can, because they are no longer attached to their employment for their health insurance. So they will choose to retire because they can. And the fact that nobody says, wait a minute, this is how misleading what you just said is.
Mm-hmm.
And this is how just bald-faced, dishonest the other side of the argument is. And when they say with such conviction of how the Affordable Care Act is going to be the end of the world and that all these horrible things are going to happen, and half the things they say are just bald-faced lies. And then you get the other side saying, well, we need to make some changes to it.
Yeah.
And the 2014, this election is going to come down to that. And if they do not take a stand, and they do not get out there, and they do not show them, the
By they, you mean we. We, all of us, Democrats, need to turn out and vote because we traditionally don't.
Turn out and vote, yes, but our leaders aren't out there.
Right.
They're not out there really making a stand on it.
Well, they also, you're right. They need to give they need to give us a reason to come out and vote for them, which is something most of them do not do. Look, if people want Republicans, they're not going to vote for Republican light. They'll vote for the real thing. Give them a reason to vote Democratic.
This is the Randi Rhodes Show on the Premier Radio Networks.